والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Our esteemed guests, Brother Muhammad and Brother Hamza Zolzis, venerable scholars and brothers and sisters in Islam, it gives me great pleasure to extend a cordial welcome to everyone in attendance today. We say to you from the bottom of our hearts, Ahlan wa sahlan, Allah. As is clear from the title of today's program, Facing the Storm, Islam's response to liberalism, feminism, and LGBTQ+. We are here today to learn the basics of these ideologies and to acquire the necessary skills to combat them in today's day and age. Respected friends, the dominant culture in the world right now is a culture that is hell-bent on eliminating anything that has to do with traditional religion in general and the values of Islam in particular. It very openly and boldly declares an ideological war against everything Islam epitomizes. For example, it has shunned theocentrism, servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which forms the very basis of Islam, and promoted in its steps anthropocentrism, which is servitude to human reason and base desires. Likewise, it has shunned and repudiated gender roles promoted in Islam, roles that are complementary and maintain the flourishing of the family and the perfect balance of society, and substituted it with the exploitation of women in the name of equality, justice, and female empowerment, what we know today as feminism. It has done away with modesty and heteronormativity, the primary traits which underpin sexual morality in Islam, and have espoused in place of it personal autonomy, sexual freedom, and homosexuality. And the list goes on. But, respected friends, despite the hostility of the storm and the pernicious threats it entails, Islam is not only able to challenge it, rather it is also able to replace it. However, Islam desperately requires men who will not cower in the chaos, who will raise their heads up high and say with pride that they are Muslims, who will implement its teachings in their lives, defend it and spread its light, thereby embodying the verse of the Quran, أَوْ مَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ كَمَنْ مَثَلُهُ فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ لَيْسَ بِخَارِجٍ مِنْهَا. Likewise, the Muslim Ummah in this day and age requires the expertise, the experience of learned scholars who can guide them in these challenging times. As the poet very beautifully says, وَآلَمَنِي وَآلَمَ كُلَّ حُرْمٍ سُؤَالُ الدَّهْرِ أَيْنَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ. That it hurts me and it hurts every person of nobility, the question of the times, where are Muslims today? Fortunately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen some of his ones to be at the forefront of the struggle, to defend Islam, to promote Islam in the face of the challenges we experience in the Ummah today. This brings me to the introduction of our two esteemed guests we have with us in this program. So firstly we have Brother Muhammad Hijab. So Brother Muhammad Hijab is an author, comparative religionist, and philosopher of religion. He is the co-founder of the Sapiens Institute and is a researcher and instructor for the organization. He has a degree in politics and master's degree in history. He has also acquired a second master's in Islamic studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies. Brother Muhammad Hijab has also completed a third master's degree in applied theology from the University of Oxford, where he focused on the philosophy of religion in applied settings. Brother Hijab is now doing his PhD in the philosophy of religion on the contingency argument for God's existence. In addition, Brother Hijab has undergone formal training in Islamic studies with a focus on the Quran, prophetic traditions, and legal reasoning. Hijab has completed Islamic seminary courses and has been given formal permission to relay Islamic knowledge on selected Islamic fields. Brother Muhammad Hijab is one of the very few Muslim public figures who deal comparatively with political, philosophical, and theological issues, and as such has amassed a following of many subscribers on YouTube in English and Arabic. Now, this is the formal introduction, but something important would be good as well. So, if you look into the biography of Brother Muhammad Hijab, he mentions that in the initial stages of his life, he was overtaken by doubt. And these doubts would trouble him. And when you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah can be tested with anything at all, but not with doubts in the deen. And eventually he tells us that in one Ramadan, when he made his dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he told him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had guided him and granted him firmness in his faith. Likewise, he states that when his mother went for Umrah, his mother made dua that she wants her son to be Ilahiyah, a promoter of Islam, called to Islam. And Alhamdulillah, we can see that his mother's dua today have reached fruition, and he has become one of the prominent guys in the English world. So the passion of Brother Muhammad Hijab is to promote Islam, is to defend Islam, and we often see him, especially the youth who are sitting here, knocking horns, butting heads with Jews, with Christians, with Hindus, with atheists, and people of different denominations in the UK, mashallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepting, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his efforts. We move on to Brother Hamza. This is a little late month, but we'll try our best, inshallah. So, Brother Hamza told this. I think that's the correct terminology. Brother Hamza is the founder and CEO of Atheist Institute. He is the author of the best-selling book, The Divine Reality for Islam and the Divine of Atheism, which has been translated in over 10 languages. He has many degrees. For example, he has the Master Research degree, an MA, and a postgraduate certificate in philosophy from the University of PhD on the Quran and its verses pertaining to it. He has studied Islam and theology under qualified scholars. Brother Hamza has spoken at many universities all around the world. He has debated prominent academics and thinkers on Islam and atheism. His interlocutors have included Professor Lawrence Cross, Professor Peter Simons, and Barker, and Professor Simon Blackburn. Brother Hamza converted to Islam in the year 2002. Brother Hamza is a professional background. He protected program management, charity, governance, and operations, and his work is a consultant for the public and private sector. He was the CEO of IRA from April 2017 until February 2020. Where he and his team developed sector-led, sector-lead systems, processes, and procedures. He grew the organization by over 500%. Operation growth of over 1,000%. This is really a formal introduction. To mention something on the informal side, Brother Hamza tells us that after accepting Islam, he had also struggled to a certain extent with doubts. So his mind would tell him to leave Islam, but his soul and his heart told him to hold on to Islam. And eventually, he managed to overcome these doubts and to see that Islam had the ability to challenge the modern ideologies and to give adequate answers to them. And this is what prompted him to make da'wah again the mission of his life. And this is what we do today, mashallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept him his love and bless him his efforts. We now leave you to the place being guest and we request him to
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Let's start again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, alhamdulillah. I'm very, very happy that everyone is here today. The imams, the aspiring imams, the mashayikh, and it is actually part of the vision and the strategy of Sapiens Institute to share ideas and help empower the leaders and the future leaders of the Ummah across the world. Because our vision, my dear brothers and sisters, is a world that is convinced of Islam. And our specific strategic focus is to empower and develop other people and leaders to be able to share Islam academically and intellectually. And what we're doing here today is so in line with our vision, and it's part of our strategic focus. And I would like to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praise Allah for giving us the opportunity to share some of these ideas to every single one of you. The second preliminary point I want to make is that it is very important to understand that myself in particular, and I think Muhammad Hijaz is going to echo the sentiments as well, that we're not mashayikh, not scholars. You are the scholars. You are graduates of a phenomenal program. Many of you are graduates of a phenomenal, robust program. Where we see ourselves is being enablers of applying that knowledge in a contemporary way. Because we have different isms and schisms, different worldviews, different ideologies that are competing for that in the hearts and minds of humanity, specifically Muslims. And I want to let you know, I'm not saying this through some kind of, hopefully, I'm saying it through kind of fake humility, but we stand on your shoulders. We stand on the shoulders of ulama, past, present, and future. And where we see our role is that we're bridging the gap between what you know, the ilm, and being able to apply it in a contemporary way. And this is based on experience, not just knowledge itself. And there is a good piece of evidence that we can find based on experience in the Dawah context. We know the first human being was who? It was Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He went in the Miraj and he went to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah was talking about, you have to pray all of these prayers. He spoke to Musa alayhi salam, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What did Musa alayhi salam say? He basically was telling you to negotiate. Because Musa alayhi salam had an experience of humanity, an experience of the Ummah. Now from this you can infer a good piece of evidence that experience is quite key and critical when it comes to understanding da'wah, understanding human beings, and understanding, the modern world. So I want you to see from that perspective that we're conveying some of our experiences, some of the secular academic ideas that you'll be aware of in order for you to apply the amazing ilm that you have to these ideas. So we're facilitators of bridging the gap between the classical ilm and the contemporary world. Is this clear? Alhamdulillah. Also, when we're delivering these presentations, I want you to write as many notes as possible. When you write things down, remember this. This helps me as well. If I want to articulate something, I start to write it first. And it helps me memorize, it helps me understand. So please get your pen and papers ready and make sure you write as many notes as possible. And this also includes any questions, because we want you to interact with us, we want you to raise your hand, we want you to ask certain questions, whether it's during the presentation or at the appropriate times. Because the whole point of this session is for you to be empowered, for you to understand these key ideas and to understand how Islam responds to these key ideas. And this is extremely, extremely important. So this is the kind of goal that we want to achieve in the next few days, that you have a good foundational understanding of liberalism with regards to the ethical normative theory, the normative ethical theories, its philosophical basis, its application in the real world, its problems. We're going to understand feminism with regards to different of feminism and the underlying key difficulties that they have with regards to to this. We also need to understand what the LGBTQ plus movement is, what are their key assumptions, how does Islam address these assumptions, how can we use that method to bring them to Islam and to show the veracity of the Islamic tradition, and so many other things, consider studies, and inshallah we're going to try and apply as much as possible. Now, you're not alone, it's not just the next 2 days, we're going to try and facilitate your development with regards to these things for the future. So we're going to share the slides, we're going to share reading material, share future videos for you to watch, introduce you to our learning platform. We're going to have in-depth courses on LGBTQ+, and so on and so forth. So this is part of your journey. I don't want you to have that kind of false expectation that you're going to spend the next 2 days here and all of a sudden you're going to be like Muhammad Hijab, right? And it's not possible. In actual fact, if we probably spend a few lifetimes, so, mashallah, tabarakallah. So, but I want you to understand that it's a journey. And this is why I want you now, to really purify your intention. Really. Because many of you are ulama and future ulama, and you may stay in South Africa. You may go all around the world, because especially in the Darul Uloom seminaries, they send the imams all around the world, from Las Vegas to Michigan to London to China to Hong Kong to Australia. You're all around the world. So you have to be prepared for this. You have to be prepared for this. And I want you to purify your intention and really have a strong intention that you're doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means you're doing it because you love Him. You're doing it because this act of worship, which is learning about these issues and defending Islam and giving dawah, this act of worship, Allah is worthy of this act of worship because He's worthy of all acts of worship. And you're doing it because you want His divine reward, and you're doing it because you want to be free from the hellfire. You want to be removed from the hellfire. So I really want us to really purify intentions and really think about a vision for ourselves as future leaders, as current leaders, as imams, that wherever you are in society, you're able to address these issues. Is this clear? This is the most important thing, because the last thing I want is you guys emerging from this and continuing the journey, and after a few years, you are the intellectual warriors of the 21st century. And then you happen to defeat liberalism, and defeat postmodernism, and defeat queer theory, and defeat feminism. And you're responsible for many people embracing Islam and many Muslims preserving the Iman. Millions. And on the day of judgment, you go to Jahannam. That's the last thing that we want. That is the last thing that we want, because that will only happen if we don't do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, we don't rely on our deeds, because Jannah is as a result of the rahmah, of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's clear. Alhamdulillah. You know this better than me, so just a reminder. I think it's good for us to remind each other. So, today we're going to go to liberalism, and we're going to split this session into two main components. The first main component is I'm just going to focus on what you would call the secular and or liberal normative ethical theories and what Islam says about this. This will provide the foundation, the moral foundation, okay? The moral epistemological foundation. Now, what does that mean? It means the study of knowledge, the theory of knowledge, and refers to things like truth. What is truth? How do we justify our beliefs? And from a moral perspective, you ask those similar questions. What is good? What is bad? How must we behave? So you're going to be hearing terms like this: epistemic, epistemology. It comes from the Greek word which refers to, I think it refers to belief, right? In Greek, it's belief or knowing. And these terms may be a little bit heavy, but I'm trying to define them for you so you know when you hear things like epistemology, it doesn't mean, okay, referring to knowledge, the theory of knowledge. When I say things like epistemic, it refers to things like truth or knowledge. Okay, it's clear? Good, alhamdulillah. So we're going to be going through this. So you're going to go through the key normative ethical theories in the West which generally speaking refers to utilitarianism and deontological ethics, which we're going to talk about, and talk about the key questions they try to answer and how Islam responds to that. And then what we're going to go into is the Islamic ethical dimension, that we are divine command theorists, that we believe in the commands of Allah. What is good is what Allah commands, and what is bad is what Allah prohibits, and so on and so forth. And we're going to address some of the contentions that we get from the secular liberal atheists concerning this divine command approach. And we're going to talk about why the Islamic approach is far more powerful, rational, and how we could use that to bring people to Islam. Because we want to center this around a Dawah fix as well. Mohammed is going to go through the key aspects with regards to liberalism concerning its philosophical foundations, its key principles, how it's applied in the modern world, certain key issues with regards to how liberals point the finger at the Islamic discourse, at the Quran and the Sunnah, how we respond to the session, go into the deeper kind of ideas. And based on sound reason, and it's the best thing to do with regards to obeying, the best thing to do is obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's good for us, it's good for individual, social, and collective flourishing for Muslims and non-Muslims. So, is this clear? So before we start the presentation, are there any key questions with regards to your expectations or anything to do with the whole next few days? Now, don't get into content right now. I'm sorry about that. Anything that you think needs to be answered before we continue? No? Excellent. Good. As I said, I do advise pen and paper, my dear brothers and sisters and Mashayikh, because when you write things down, you tend to remember them, and it's very important for that internalization. Because we don't want you to forget this stuff, we want you to be touched, moved, and inspired, so you can continue that important spiritual journey, so you achieve exactly what you intended to achieve in the next few days, and that will facilitate where you will be in the next few years, inshallah, okay? Okay, can you see the slides? Okay, perfect. Good. Okay, Bismillah. So what we're going to be going through right now is, what is the good life, right? But basically, I just want to talk about ethics, morality, from the perspective of Islam and the perspective of the disbelievers, the kuffar, yeah? And generally speaking, when it comes to Western discourse and ideological trends, we're talking about secularism and liberalism in a broad sense. Secularism and liberalism, they really adopt what we call rational normative ethical theories. Okay? Ethical theories that tell us is good, what is bad, how much pay, based on certain principles, the human mind. These are rational, emotive, and we're going to go through. Don't worry about the term. Go along. But the first.
We can talk to Saeed this evening. You don't have to message him. We just talk to him nicely this evening and get him his consent.
A study of the general idea of goodness, the general study of right action, applied ethics, meta-ethics, moral psychology, and the metaphysics of moral responsibility. So in terms of the key words, one thing I want to write down is meta-ethics, okay? Meta-ethics is like a branch of metaphysics, okay? And meta-ethics basically asks the question, what is the source and nature of morality? So moral epistemology is about how do we know what is good and bad. Metaethics is what is the source and nature of morality. So I repeat, when we talk about moral epistemology, we're talking about how do we know what is good, how do we know what is bad, what is right action, what is wrong action. When we're talking about meta-ethics, we are talking about what is the source and nature of morality. Which basically means, does morality come from the human mind? Is it subjective? Is it objective? Is this clear? Good. So to break this down further, ethics or morality deals with goodness, right action, practical application of ethical ideas. So this refers to applied ethics. We have ethical coming from a certain perspective and applying those ethical principles in a particular context is called applied ethics. Okay? Now, the first thing to know is these ideas and concepts are timeless. They don't just belong to the Western tradition. Human beings have been asking questions about what is good conduct, what is bad conduct from the beginning. And ethics tries to answer the questions such as what is good, how should one act, and what is the nature of morality, what is the source and nature of morality. Now, there is an idea that some saying that ethics is dead. Idea, because sometimes people claim that they shouldn't care about, right, they should do what benefits them. But the irony is the idea that you should do what benefits you is actually an ethical theory. It's called ethical ego. That you base your ethical judgments, you base right and wrong action. This is actually called ethical egoism. So even to think that ethics is dead and that you just rely on making yourself happy is actually an ethical theory. Yeah? And if you think about it, my dear brothers and sisters and mashayikh, the questions such as how should I behave, what is good, what is immoral conduct, these timeless questions, and they remain with us until the day of judgment as a collective species. Is this clear so far, what ethics is? Good. is Islam ethical? Now, I know there's been a really kind of hot discussion in the classical tradition concerning the different schools of creed, the Maturidis, the Ash'ari, the Ash'ari tradition, concerning ethics, concerning divine commands. Don't worry, we're not going to get into that. The teaching today is universal. Okay? So, the question is Islam ethical? I think generally speaking, we're not going to disagree with the answer being yes. And a really good book, an in-depth study, this book is in Arabic, it's called Al-Akhlaq al-Islamiyya. It was by al-Fikr. And he actually writes about the 8 key categories of ethics in the Islamic tradition. And it was a very good one to refer to because it shows that there are ethical principles behind the divine commands. You could call them wisdoms or the hikmah behind the divine commands. For example, he describes 8 categories: rules in theology, rules in worship, rules or principles of economic transactions, the rules of social relations, the rules of individual conduct, the rules regulating contracts, the rules of ethics, the ahkam of akhlaq, the rules of etiquette. And Habalaka says that if you closely look at these 8 principles, you see that all of the commands in the Quran and Sunnah can be reduced to them. And he actually makes some interesting points, and let me give you some examples of how to apply these principles. So, the ahkam of worship. So, what is the key principle behind the category of ethics in Islam concerning the ahkam of worship? And he basically reduces it to that thanking those who love you. And we know gratitude to Allah is actually the key to worship. As we know in Kitab, in Surah Al-Fatiha, which is a summary of the whole of the Quran, and a summary of Tawheed, it tells us, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, all perfect praise and gratitude belong to the Lord of everything that exists. So thanks and praise, these are key to worship. Also, he argues that if you ignore your benefactor, this is ungrateful and therefore is unethical. So he reduces the ahkam of ibadah to this principle. Also, what about the ahkam of economic transactions? He basically says that this is based on the ethical principle of accepting the truth. So he says, for example, if you buy a product for a fixed price, then the seller tries to double the price, then this is going to be unethical because the basis of the economic and social is truth itself. So if he denies the fact that he gave you a fixed price, what he's doing, he's rejecting the truth. So these are just some examples from Sheikh Abdul Rahman Habalaka's discussion on ethics, that you could reduce the ethics in the Quran and the Sunnah to 8 key categories, and these are based on key timeless principles. So you try to rationalize or make sense the underlying hikmah behind the ahkam and the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is this clear? So here are some examples of some ethics in Islam to remind ourselves that Islam is an ethical tradition. For example, we have what you call the golden rule, right? The hadith al-Nawawi, the 13th hadith in his Arba'in, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يهب لنفسه. You won't truly believe unless you love for your brother, you love for yourself. Now, An-Nawawi, in his explanation, explains this hadith and says this also means humanity. From what point of view? That you want goodness and guidance for them. And we have, I think he was a Maliki scholar or a Shafi'i scholar in Imam Taqiq al-Eid. He says something very similar concerning this is a sense of wanting goodness and guidance for human beings. So this is the sense of the golden rule If you want goodness for yourself and guidance for yourself, you should want goodness for other people. And there are other various ahadith I believe in Muslim Ahmed and Abu, and also the hadith in Tariq and Kabir, narrated by Bukhari, which some scholars have authenticated as Sahih, which basically uses the word linnas, love for humanity, what you love for yourself. Is this clear? So the sense of the golden rule. And also, obviously, generally, God's commands, Allah's commands, are based on justice. They promote goodness. And these commands forbid what is shameful, blameworthy, and oppressive. And Allah says in the Quran, Allah commands justice, doing good, and generosity towards relatives, and He forbids what is shameful, blameworthy, and oppressive. He teaches you so that you may take heed. Also, in the 7th chapter of the Quran is the very famous verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, say, Allah does not command disgraceful deeds. How can you say about Allah things that you do not know? Also justice. The famous verse in chapter 4, verse 135, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about upholding justice. O you who believe, uphold justice and bear witness to Allah, even if it's against yourselves, your parents, your close relatives, whether the person is rich or poor. Certain statement about it. He said it's a great idea for ants, right? So when we're talking about ethics, remember from the Islamic perspective, rational ethical theories that are on the human mind. And it's based on two key features. They have to be justifiable, meaning they have to make sense, they have to be rationally justified, and they have to be reliable, meaning they have to work. And they use these two things to determine what is right and wrong. So, normative ethical theories are rational theories that are formulated by using one mind and trying to rationally justify it and have to be reliable. And what they do, my dear brothers and sisters and mashayikh, is they formulate principles or criteria that they believe are justified and reliable in order to help us answer the moral questions, the moral epistemological questions, what is right and what is wrong. Is this clear so far? Okay, good. By the way, when we talked about Abdul Rahman al-Habal, when we talked about the 8 categories of moral principles, they're rational. He's rationalized the Quran and the Sunnah into 8 categories that can be based on certain rational principles or hikmah that he derived from the Quran and Sunnah. I don't want you now to think that he's adopting a secular liberal approach, just relying on the mind, because he's not saying that his rationalization is the basis for commands. He's saying, I believe in Allah and the Messenger, he can categorize these commands in these 8 categories, and they seem to have these principles. So it's the other way around. He believes the source is the Quran and the Sunnah, irrespective of his rationalization, but then he starts to see amazing principles that he's put into 8 categories that you can also understand behind it, okay? So it's a subtlety for you to understand, because we don't want to use the shirt of being a modernist or something. Yeah? And I know there's a particular tradition of being a modernist in South Africa, but when we modernist, we're talking about someone who's trying to apply Islam in the modern world and change, distort Islam to fit modern ideas and modern ideological constructs. It's not someone who doesn't wear a phone. Okay, so I know you know that. Anyone who doesn't wear clothes or a modernist. Yeah? And it could be, you never know, but trust me, there are many people with clothes who are modernists too, believe me. Alhamdulillah. Now here's a caveat, here's a very important one for you to understand. We're not going to go in depth into these normative ethical theories, this is unnecessary at this stage, because we're having a discussion on the ability for these theories to answer the key questions concerning morality. We don't have to go into the nuances, irrelevant applies, okay? We're not applying these principles in certain scenarios. We're just talking about how do these theories answer these moral questions, like what is good, what is bad, what is the reference point for good or bad. So we're dealing with these key moral epistemological questions, and we're going to show how Islam is far more superior, conceptually, rationally, otherwise. So there are 3 main normal ethical theories: teleological ethics, deontological ethics, and virtual ethical theories. Now, teleological theories. Now, let's break it down linguistically. So, teleology finds its etymology, meaning the linguistic meaning. It comes from the Greek word telos, or telos, as they say in English, right? So, telos means the end. Yeah? Like my mom used to say, telos pandon, which basically means just end it or something. Right? Or delio, which means just stop it, yeah, or end it, yeah. Delio, which basically means just stop it, my child. So I get that a lot. So it's in the Greek language. Logos basically means thought or idea or reason, right? Like when you say Isa logos, meaning you are logical. Or Muhammad Hijab ina logos. Muhammad Hijab logical. So it means reason. And what teleological theories do, and this is the key principle to understand, they determine the whole work of something, of an the right or wrongness of a human action based on outcome or consequences. So that's the main thing you need to understand. So the broad category of this normative ethical theory called teleological theories, they judge an action, a moral action that is right or wrong, concerning its consequences. That's why you would hear teleological theories also referred to as consequentialist theories or consequentialism. Is this clear so far? Alhamdulillah. So, what they would say is an action is good if its consequences provide some benefit. Now, there is a distinction between individual benefit and collective benefit, which we're going to unpack in a few minutes. But the main thing to understand is teleological ethical theories. They say I'm using my mind, my rational faculties, to understand a particular moral action, and that moral action is bad if its consequences are harmful or they facilitate ill-being. This action is good if it facilitates happiness or well-being. Is this clear? So the judge of a particular action is about the results. Clear? Good. Now, within teleological theories, you have two main other theories and utilitarianism. Now, remember, teleological theories are called goal-directed. So they look at the consequence of a particular action. Now, the difference between ethical egoism and utilitarianism is that ethical egoism focuses on the well-being or ill-being on just you individuals. But utilitarianism focuses on the well-being or the ill-being of the greatest number of people. And that's what I said before we asked the question, if it's dead, many people argue it's dead and they say, you should just do what makes you happy. Because that ethical theory is ethical egoism. Focus on me. I'm the one who's going to be happy. I don't care about anybody else. Right? What's important is me. And obviously, ethical egoist theorists would basically argue that that is actually good for everybody else at some point. They may have an argument, but we don't have to get into that. So what focus on is utilitarianism as from a point of view. How do we know what is right and wrong? So as you know, we've discussed teleological theory about the consequence of a particular action. If it facilitates well-being or happiness, it's good. If it facilitates ill-being, it's bad. And what utilitarian they say that maximum well-being or maximum usefulness for the maximum number of people. And you don't really need to know this, but it's good to know that this theory developed in the 19th century this theory has developed clarifies and corrects some of the collective one. So yeah, the greatest amount of happiness or the greatest amount of being for the increases the well-being. Okay. If action X increases the well-being for the majority, this is morally good. And then we'll ask, what actually increases the well-being or increases suffering or ill-being for the majority of the people, then they say this action is actually immoral. Now, before I get into some of the criticisms, already, what do you think some of the criticisms are? Give me some critique here. Yes, brother.
It's not set in stone. It's very flexible because something can be morally good at one point in time and for the collective or the individual, but given different circumstances, the same action can be morally wrong for the group or the individual.
Yeah, of course. These theories are applied. So when you talk about applied ethics, you would start to think about different times in society based upon their limited understanding of the consequences. They would have different perspectives of morality. For example, there are utilitarian thinkers that would argue from their own principles that homosexuality is immoral. But now today, utilitarian thinkers actually say that homosexuality is amoral. It's not even a moral action. They'll say it's about rights. And they would say even it's not immoral. Meaning, there are wrong-making features argue based on, they say we have new understanding of the consequences, but in my view, because of ideological constructs, and we'll talk about later the role ideology impacting, it ignores the individual. Well, they would argue that the maximum number of happiness, the maximum of people is the right thing to do. Why? Because if you just focus on the individual, never focus on individual happiness, they will say that en masse, in terms of calculus, you'd have a society that's less happy and less happy. But we focus on the idea, the consequences themselves. Why is that a problem? How can that be a problem?
The consequences get too excessive to that more justice system.
Okay, good. So think about that more. Think about that more. So the consequences can get excessive. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with happiness. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, sure. Beautiful. How do you know what is real happiness? How do you know? And what is the secular bias here? There's a metaphysical secular bias. Metaphysics refers to form and nature of reality. There is another bias here. I'm going to give you a clue, the dunya bias here. Because they're talking about the consequences where? The world. What have they ignored? The akhirah. So really, you could be designing consequences. Don't obey Allah, you're going to hell forever. All right, I want to be happy. So the greatest happiness, the greatest number of people still obey Allah, right? So you can turn the tables different from a utilitarian perspective. But you could say that there is a secular bias, a naturalistic bias in this discourse because the consequences are only in the dunya. But also, the consequences are only understood based on faith. And that's why there's a lot of different utilitarian thinkers on, well, what is the consequence here? And what is happiness? What is going to increase well-being? And that's why you have in Western society, generally speaking, is based on utilitarianism and ethical egoism, deontological ethics. You have this flux of things changing over time. Those say, oh, there's no better now. And that's why when we discuss Islam, it's almost bigger because we don't rely on the big state action based on its consequences. Now, there's more nuance to this because there is an overlap between all of these ethical theories which we'll discover briefly. But generally speaking, the main focus has not, it depends on certain moral duties and obligations that they derive as a result of certain criteria. And those criteria come from where? The limited human mind. And there are three main areas of deontological ethics. You don't have to go into them, it's not necessary for today's presentation. But you have aid-centered deontological ethics, patient-centered deontological ethics, and contractualist deontological ethics. So, deontological ethics is basically saying moral agents have to honor human rights and meet moral obligations at the cost of any optimal outcome, at the cost of maximal happiness for the greatest number of people. So they're basically saying something being morally good, something being morally right, is based on the consequences, because consequences theory is based on certain criteria that we decide in our rational faculties, find out what we are duty bound to do, because it's based on a moral obligation. Is this clear? Let me give an example to make it. So in the 19th century, we had what? We had members of anti-slavery movement. But if you were a Christian at that time, if you were a utilitarian at that time, the transatlantic slave movement and slavery in America was actually good. Because when they look at evidence, they don't look at individuals or pockets or here and there. They look at what is the greatest number of happiness for the greatest number of people. For the greatest number of people happen to be blacks. And actually having blacks as slaves to support the economy and for the economy to grow, this is fantastic. It's greatest number of happiness for the greatest number of people. So one could argue that under utilitarianism, slavery was kind of justified. And that's why in Western theory, it's usually a combination of both of these theories that we combine. But according to deontological ethics, they know we are duty bound not to discriminate against people and oppress people just because of the color of their skin. And deontological theories of morality were developed by German philosopher called Immanuel Kant, who lived in the 1700s and died in the early 1800s. This is clear what deontological ethics are. Bro, we're not too deep into the different versions of deontological ethics, because all we need to focus on is the key epistemological moral questions they try to answer. Remember, epistemology, what does it mean? Remember. We have it. When I say epistemic, what does that refer to? Okay, can we turn it off? Please. Okay, we're gonna aim to finish at 11 days and go straight to the second session. The next session, okay? So, virtue ethics, which really comes from kind of Aristotelian approach. He had this idea of eudaimonia, evdonia. Eudaimonia was basically a sense of holistic well-being, holistic individual happiness. And he believed to develop this holistic kind of well-being and happiness of the individual, you have to be virtuous. And developing these virtues, you're more likely to have virtuous behavior. Yeah? So what virtue ethics does, it removes the emphasis away, the analytical emphasis from rule-based decision, basically deontological ethics, and it removes the emphasis from the consequences, and it focuses on individual human character, your virtue. So let me repeat, virtue ethics removes the analytical emphasis from let's develop rules and criteria for moral action, which is deontological ethics, and it removes itself away from any consequences, which is ideological ethics, and it focuses on the virtues. For example, a consequentialist or teleological ethicist, like ethical egoist or utilitarian, he would say that giving charity is good. Why do you think they would say giving charity is good? Because it maximizes happiness for the greatest number of people. So a deontological ethicist, why would you say charity is good? Because you have a duty to help people. Good, Zakhir. Now the virtue ethicists would say, they would say helping others would display desirable virtues in yourself. So if you display within yourself empathy, caring for others, being charitable, then you're more likely to give charity. So giving charity is good because it's a reflection of your virtues. Is this clear? So let's take the example of saving one's life. So what a virtue ethicist would say concerning saving one's life is that you shouldn't just do it out of duty, because that seems to lack a good motivation. A better motivation is being compassionate and kind. And if you're compassionate and kind and courageous, building these virtues within yourself, you're more likely to actually be a moral person and do more actions. And you're more likely to lead a virtuous life and a moral life by cultivating these virtues. Now, here's some important words. So the moral philosophers wasn't in the Hurt House and Glenn Pettygrove, they make an important point, and it's good for you to realize. Teleological ethics, consequentialist ethics, deontological ethics, and virtue ethics, they're not standalone, there are some overlaps. Because virtue ethicists will consider some duty, they will consider some consequences. Virtue ethicists, deontological ethics will consider some virtue, they would consider some consequences too. But foundationally, the key moral epistemological questions they try to answer is based on the things that we just mentioned. Although there are some overlaps, a consequentialist will consider some virtues and will consider some of moral obligations as well. So it's not as straightforward as saying these are like mutually exclusive moral ethical. There are some overlaps. Is this clear? Okay, alhamdulillah. So we've gone through the key moral epistemological questions. No, we don't have to go in deep now at this stage, because we're these are foundational questions we're trying to address and to see how it answers these questions. The details are almost irrelevant at this point. So here's the question. What are the moral problems with these theories in light of moral epistemology, Islamic moral epistemology? So before we go to the next slide, what do you think Islam says about these ethical theories or these key moral epistemological questions we're trying to answer? So as a summary, the consequentialist looks at the consequences of an action. Maximum happiness for the maximum number of people with regards to a utilitarian. The ethical egoist would say maximum happiness for me, for the individual. The ontological ethics would say we have to formulate rule-based criteria or certain ethical criteria in order for us to find out what our duties we must adhere to and follow. The virtue ethics would say we need to discuss what the virtues are, what are these virtues, and how can we develop these virtues in order for us to live a virtuous life and to be moral. Why do you think Islam would have a problem with these? Or what would be the Islamic take on these? Let's take two of you in the audience, and then we'll get the answer. Think aloud. There's no right or wrong. Yes, brother. Good. Does it take the pleasure of Allah into account? Because we would argue that the pleasure of Allah is actually the thing that we should be following. But if you please Allah, is that also good for you as well? Yes, that would be. Yes. The consequences, virtues, and principles are all based on the human mind, the aql. And generally speaking, when our morality is based on what? On wahi. But is there a role for the aql? Of course, because you have to use your aql to understand the divine commands. And even if you're going to go deeper, we also have an Islamic basis for maslaha, mafsada, for harms, benefits and harms. And within the discourse of maslaha and mafsada, you have the maslaha mursala, which you discuss. You rationalize the benefits on the ground. So you still have to use a reason in certain contexts for sure, but in general, we refer to divine commands. So that would be the key attack against these more epistemological outlooks and questions. But let's break it down a little bit further. So number one, they take the human mind as the ultimate judge. And it's the foundational reference point to formulate ethics. Remember, these are rational ethical theories. So we could have a bunch of questions that challenges each of these ethical theories. So I want you to think about this question. So when we think about teleological ethics, we could say this, and these are very important questions. Can the human mind fully investigate the consequences or implications of one moral behavior? And that's why the secular in nature. We believe Allah has the full moral picture. Allah knows everything. We have the pixel. So they have a moral pixel understanding of reality. They're assuming we will know the consequences. But we say, no, Allah knows. Also, we will say there is a secular bias, a metaphysical bias as we discussed, when investigating the consequences because you ignore the akhirah. And the akhirah, this is, compare eternality with a finite life. So if you reject or ignore the akhirah, then your assessment of the consequences is going to be considered incomplete. So these are the key points to try and figure out what's wrong with teleological ethics. What about deontological ethics? Here's a question, my dear brothers and sisters and mashayikh. Can the human mind fully understand the moral values and duties are what they are? Who is to judge? To whom do we owe these moral claims and judgment? How do we prioritize these moral duties? How do we apply them? What about virtue ethics? Fine, being virtuous is great. But what are these virtues? Who prioritizes them? Who prioritizes them? You? Al-Aqab? And that's why we have two many answers. Allah or the human being. And that's why we want to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we could question these normative ethical theories rationally, and we use this to show them why Allah should be the source of morality, and then we could use that as a basis for dawah. So, let me just check the time. Okay, 10 minutes. So when we focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to understand who Allah is. Allah is al-Hakim. Yes or no? He has the totality of knowledge and wisdom. He's al-Alim. Allah is al-Bar. He's the greatest benefactor, the source of all goodness. Correct? Allah can therefore make the universal moral claim. Allah is not limited. There's nothing external to Allah that limits him. Allah has maximal perfection. His knowledge is maximally perfect. He knows all things. He has maximal wisdom. So when he makes a command, we know it's in line with the divine wisdom and the divine knowledge. So therefore you can make the universal moral claim. Is this clear? Number two, Allah has a complete picture of the moral picture. Allah knows the full consequences. We just have a pixelated understanding. If I do a particular wrong action, that wrong action, if I use my aql to decide it's a wrong action, it may end up being good. I don't know what the future consequences are. The kind of domino chain from a moral perspective and how it affects individuals, society, and the whole world is almost impossible to completely understand. And that's why Western morality always changes, because they rely on the aql and their assessments, which can change based on new data, new realities. Sometimes they go backward, sometimes they go forward, sometimes they go full circle. So it's very important to understand that Allah has the full moral picture just by virtue of who Allah is. He knows everything. He knows what's truly good for us and what's truly good for our well-being in a holistic sense, because it includes the akhirah. The third point to understand concerning Allah, He is the ultimate judge and we have a duty towards Him. By virtue of who Allah is, He is the only deity worthy of worship. We are duty bound to obey Allah, to submit to Him, and to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is almost the essence of what worship is. To express our submissiveness and to express our utmost dependency on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we realize because of who Allah is, He is the ultimate judge. And also, we have a duty towards Allah in terms of obeying Him. And obeying His commands is actually the moral thing to do. Also, with regards to virtue, who defines the virtue? Who defines it? How do we prioritize it? The human mind or Allah? Who is going to give you the right answer? The human mind or Allah? I want to hear this. Why? Because of who Allah is. Now, a key note to understand. All of this depends on the fact that we have to believe in Allah and we believe in His revelation. And this is why from a Dawah context, you raise these questions, you show that Allah can provide a universal moral claim. But Allah has a moral picture. Allah is the ultimate judge and we have belief towards Him. And you explain that Allah defines our virtues and He prioritizes them. Because of who Allah is. And then they'll raise the question, I don't believe in Allah. And the deed. So instead of people pointing the finger and saying, why did you cut the hand of the thief? Why did you forbid homosexuality? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Then now you should be empowered to say, we have an open Q&A. Now you have the ability to say, hold on a second, you have a moral assumption. You're basing your moral outlook on maybe virtue ethics, your philosophy ethics, consequentialist theory, with divine command theory. We believe in the commands of Allah. Why? And you can explain exactly what this explained, and you could challenge the theories by some of the questions that we raised, and say, therefore, the right question you should be asking is, who must we refer to when it comes to morality? The human mind or Allah? Do you see how powerful this is? Alhamdulillah. So, very quickly, but can't Muslims use the aql as a source of morality? Generally speaking, of course, we're going to use the aql to actually understand the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can use the aql concerning what is naturally good. We can't with regards to what we think is going to give us divine reward and divine punishment. Okay? So that's why it's very important to understand this. So we use the aql to apply the principles of the Quran and Sunnah in various contexts. And this is the legal moral reasoning in the Islamic tradition. And we cannot use the aql to inform us what are the actions that have reward and punishment, because this comes from wahi directly. But in terms of what you would consider naturally good, like in all the schools of Aqidah, you don't need revelation to tell you that, saving a life is a good thing in general, right? You don't need revelation for that. This is what you call basically the fitri good or the natural good. And this has been discussed amongst the ulama in the Maturidi tradition, the Ash'ari in the Athari tradition concerning these things. So there is a distinction to be made, but we don't have to open the door to this right now, or we could just remind us that it has a particular role. Number one, to assess the divine commands to understand what they actually are. And number two, to be able to understand what is natural good, but it has no role in basically allowing us to find out what is rewardable and what is punishable from a hereafter perspective. And also you have to understand the maslahi, a particular moral point that is allowed by the Sharia. Is this clear? I think that's a good summary. We don't have to get into too much detail concerning that. So a final point, my dear brothers and sisters, a key objection by the atheists and the secularists and the liberals is something called the threefold dilemma. And I got this answer from because I had this podcast to do that was heavy in regards to moral ethics. I spent a private 1 hour with him. He was introduced to me by Sheikh Yasser al-Hanafi, another double graduate. And I wanted to provide an answer that was creedally neutral. Because as you know, there is debate between the Ash'ari, the Maturidis, and the Atharis concerning divine commands. Yeah? And I didn't want to get into that because the hikmah of dawah is something to provide universal answers that are not contingent or dependent on one particular way. And this is the hikmah of dawah. Yeah? So, what is your threefold dilemma? Basically, they say this. So, is it good because Allah commanded it? Or is it good because the commands of Allah are good? So already they're trying to formulate a dilemma. There's two horns of this dilemma. The first one is it good because Allah commanded it? Well, what they assume here is that Allah's commands are arbitrary. Allah could command to kill all the non-graduates. Hypothetically, yeah? Would that be good because Allah just commanded it? So what they're trying to do here, they're trying to dislocate Allah's command from who He is. And what we mean by this, His names and attributes. So there's arbitrary. And they also have the other horn, which is, well, is it good because the commands of Allah are good? What's the problem with this horn? Who knows? Without reading the slide. Is it good because Allah is good because Allah's commands are good? What's the problem here? Who said that? Allahu Akbar. Allah is obligated to follow an external criteria for good, external to Allah Himself, which would be kufr. Yeah? So how do we solve this dilemma? So I sat down with, and I believe it's a false dilemma, and I sat down with the Sheikh Abdurrahman Fihr, and he provided a phenomenal answer that is derived from the big Sheikh Shah and Definitely. And you find this in the conclusive argument for Allah. You studied this book? You must have. Yeah? And he's a subcontinent scholar and thinker. And this is what he basically said. Allah's commands, as manifested in Islamic law through the Quran and the Sunnah, address the moral needs of human beings on a personal, social, and political level. The commands of Allah work. And we're not making a moral judgment here now. We're saying they work, they're functional. And they're functional on an individual, social, and political level that opens the door to the well-being and functioning of human beings in that particular society. So how can they be arbitrary? It seems that the commands of Allah are like a key that goes into a lock that opens the door to social, political, and individual well-being. Is a key arbitrary? A key is designed specifically. So he would argue you take the first dilemma by saying it's false. Yes, it's good because Allah commanded it, but Allah's commands are not arbitrary, and you could do it two ways. You could link it back to Allah's names and attributes, that He is the one who source of goodness, He's the only being worthy of worship, and so on and so forth. Or you could take this route and basically say, I totally disagree with this arbitrary. The arbitrariness assumption is a false assumption because Allah's commands are like a key that go to a specific lock that open the door to individual social well-being. And that's even going into the other aqidah mess on focusing on all the other problems that may happen as a result of the massive discussions within the schools of creed on this particular issue. So finally, my dear brothers and sisters and Mashayikh, what is the role of ideology or worldviews in the context of moral and legal reasoning? And I want you to just focus on, here's a thought experiment. Any average person on the street and get them to guarantee that they could bet their life on it, they'll sacrifice their life on this, that what they think is good or bad has nothing to do and is not related in any way to the social and political movement of society. And that's why I said to you modernists in the Muslim community. I said, would you have this view 200 years ago? It's a slave, a social slave. So we have to realize that our moral outlook is not just only dictated by certain principles, it's dictated by some form of collective consciousness that is dictated by the use of a particular language and the power structures of a particular society. So for example, capitalism and individualism, it would skew the understanding of what is right and wrong, because an excessive individualistic society especially in the capitalistic context about wealth and accumulation of wealth, and individualism about ethical egoism as well to a certain degree, it's about my individual happiness. They would think it's morally okay to put our elderly parents into modern day concentration camps. Necessarily because of ethical position, it's a combination of an ideology and a combination of individualism and a combination of some ethical theory that takes that particular action. So even the penal code, when they look at penal codes in the justice system, they would say that some of the punishments in Islam are harsh or wrong because they have an individualistic outlook. Because you could argue, apply a consequentialist theory on the Sharia will still win, even from a dunya perspective. If you use your Islam, cutting the hand of the thief with all of the conditions in place, system and model, you would say this is the best for society based on utilitarian principle. I believe that. But they won't get to that view. Why? Because ideology plays a role in what they view as good or bad. Because if they're liberals, they would generally speaking have an individualistic outlook. And liberalism, as based on the works of Charles Taylor and others, you see that it's the primacy on the individual. The individual is the lens in which they understand what is right, what is wrong from a rights perspective, and it affects the way they see utilitarianism and deontological ethics as well, because it's based on an individualistic outlook. As Marilyn Friedman, the professor, says, individualism is seeing the individual as an abstract entity devoid from social attachments and obligations. So if you see it from that perspective, you zoom in just on the individual, yeah, it seems harsh just on the individual. But if you see society as a symbiotic relationship between the individual and society individual, then your view on ethics will change, your view on the penal code will change because you see a bigger picture. Which echoes the famous hadith of the Prophet when he talked about, the rights of Allah or the limits of Allah are like people on the boat. You have the people on the lower deck, and the people on the upper deck are giving fresh water to the people on the lower deck, but they stop giving that fresh water so they can hold in the boat, and what happens to the boat? So, this is the end of this presentation. We're only going to have literally 3-minute break because we've got a lot to cover and hijab has a lot to cover as well. So what we need to do, my dear brothers, is quickly summarize what we just covered. We covered what ethics is in general. We covered ethics is from an Islamic perspective, Islam ethical, and we focused on Sheikh Abdul Rahman Hafannaka and his 8 categories and the hikmah behind, the moral hikmah behind the 8 categories to reduce all of the commands of Allah and the Sunnah to these categories to show that there is hikmah behind the moral reasoning of Islam. We talked about the key normative ethical rational theories, teleological ethics, also known as consequentialist theories, for example, ethical egoism, utilitarianism. We also talked about deontological ethics and talked about the 3 main deontological ethical perspectives, just labeled them, we don't have to get into them, but we spoke about what deontological ethics is. Then we spoke about virtue ethics. Then we spoke about the key problems from an Islamic perspective on how to challenge these ethical theories by raising certain key questions. And then we came to the conclusion, what's better, the human mind or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Then we said, okay, why Allah? He could be the universe more claim, he has a moral picture, and so on and so forth. And we discussed all of these things of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to refer to with regards to what is right and wrong. Then we dealt with the key contention, which is the people's dilemma, referring to an argument by Sheikh Shawwal Allah. Then we spoke about the role of aql in the Islamic tradition in general. Then we spoke about the role of ideology. And significantly, we said, how can we use all of this sort of discussion to make it to Tawheed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the way to do that is when you point the finger at a particular thing in Islam, or the raise of a particular moral question, you uncover what moral assumption that they have, maybe utilitarian, ethical egoism, deontological or virtue ethics, and then you say, these are the questions against these theories, And this is why Allah should be referred to. And for you to understand that, you have to believe in Allah and His Messenger and His evidence for Allah and His Messenger, which is not the topic for today, of course, but this is a methodological way of dealing with secular liberal normative ethical theories to show the moral superiority of Islam. That's the summary. We should leave the questions to the end because there's a lot to cover. Because we started a little bit late, I have to do this in about an hour or 10 minutes. So I really suggest we have a sit-in break, inshallah, because we have a lot to cover. Because we have to finish at 12:30. Because after the lunch, we're going to go for family, right? Which is probably your favorite topic. So, mashallah, so let's pause from there. If you have any questions, please 3-4 minute break, write the questions down. Because we are going to answer your questions, inshallah. Okay, we're here, we're not running away. And even if it's after time, I'll still be here. I want to stay literally 10 meters away. I'm at your service, you guys are at your service. So have a 3-minute break. Make sure you write the questions down concerning today's topic. You will get the slides as well. Have a nice 3-minute break, write the questions down, and then prepare for the start of Jan's presentation. Okay? May Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
There's refreshing from the side for all these activities. So because we only have a 3-minute break, you don't have refreshing, take the tea, coffee, whatever you want. Just quickly don't get whatever you want, inshallah. Come back to your write the questions.
Sorry, okay, what's the story? See, the thing is, right, the internet here is stable, but it doesn't, like, iPad is pretty stable. But yeah, on the laptop, it doesn't connect it properly. I don't know why. So what you can do, well, what's the next slides? Do they have the next slides? I can put you on the iPad itself. So let's try to try connecting to that device of yours.
Yeah, I don't get that.
Yes, or is it a wrong thing? Yes, it is a wrong thing. Okay, good. So if I'm making a claim, logically speaking, what do I have to provide? Proof and evidence. Okay, excellent. So now the liberal comes forward and says we have to prioritize the individual. And because of that, we believe in liberalism. And because of that, we believe in human rights. And because of that, we believe cutting the hand is wrong. See, what is built upon falsehood is falsehood. We have in Usul al-Fiqh, Ibn al-Yaqeen, we have this principle which is build upon certainty. You cannot build castles on thin air. I was speaking to the architect of this place, he said, you're the soil and this and that, you have to put on the right kind of foundation. I'll ask you a question. The proposition that we should prioritize the individual, does it have any evidence? It doesn't have any evidence. Can you believe this? The whole religion is based on a myth and something without evidence. So you can just believe me, I've done this many times. All you have to do is ask them a simple question. You say that you should prioritize individual rights. What's your proof for this? I mean, you're going to see all kinds of answers. I mean, you'll be surprised to find they have no answers. In fact, prove this to me. What do you mean prove it? Okay, you know how mathematics teachers, they put 2 + 2 = 4, proof and this and that. Can you prove to me that an individual is possible? No, you can't prove it. So the basic assumptions are unprovable. This is a very big problem with that. By the way, they can ask, okay, what do you guys prioritize? They prioritize Allah's rights and Allah, and they prove it. We said, we do have a proof of this, actually. We have a proof of God's existence. We have a proof of the oneness of God. We have a proof for the revelation of the Prophet. If you ask us to prove it, we have some answers. And if it follows that the Quran is the word of God, ipso facto, yeah, it follows that we should be following it. Because God is all knowing, simple as this. So we do have a proof. We have answers, they don't have answers. This is an important difference. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So we've already kind of discussed this. A lot of questions asked about Islam have a liberal premise. And we know that the punitive laws, for example, ridda laws, homosexuality punishments, restriction questions, or in an Islamic state, if you have homosexual doing X, Y, Z. We were the so to say. Why not? Isn't this against human expression and right? No, but and then some scholars will say it's not false. Well, whatever they do behind closed doors is not something the state is going to get involved in. Well, it's true. I mean, Islam's not going to your house. The guy is not the Khalifa outside the house and see what you're doing. But we're missing a point. We're playing to their tune, which is that they are saying there should be no what? Or sexual freedom should be fully expressed. Even John Stuart Mill, he said that if people were having sex in the street, sorry to say, the state should step in and stop this. This is the founder of social liberalism, effectively. He said if people were having sex in the streets, man and woman. I don't know of any country, by the way, liberal country, yeah, United Kingdom, United States, whatever, which allows sex on the streets. A man and a woman having intercourse. Like, the question is, why did you stop there? If you're allowed to express yourself, why is that the point where you guys have a point? Yeah, you have a problem with sex on the streets, but you don't have a problem with sex on the streets. What's the major difference? I mean, the child has access to this, the child has access to that. And why should the child not have access to it? Who gets to decide where the starting point and the stopping point of this stuff is anyway? You see what I mean? Some of them will go, actually, maybe you should have sex on the streets. And then they'll be fulfilling exactly what the Prophet said, which is that there's going to come a time where people will be having sex on the streets and no one's going to stop it. Can you see what's happening? But the point is this, is that there are limitations. Who gets to decide those limitations? They will say we should be able to express as much as possible. Because that is the expression of the human free will and the expression of that. We would go back to the point. Why should that be prioritized? Because they have no answer to this question. So let me test you guys to see if you are. Let me play devil's advocate. Let's tell a little now. Yes. The man here with the white top, yes. What's your name? What's your name?
Salam.
Oh, I thought you were saying Salam. What's your name? Are you Salam? Yeah? Okay, mashallah. Now pretend I'm a liberal guy, yeah? Why does your religion allow hand cutting? Don't you think that this is inhibiting human individuality and freedom of expression? Okay, good. See, look already. See what he's doing. I was asking a question. Let me tell you a secret. Yes? The one who's asking the question has the power. You see, asking the question, who are you to interrogate me? I didn't decide to go into a courtroom, make you my judge, and I become the defendant. You're not my judge. You're not fit to be my judge. Nor are you the judge of Islam or the morality thereof. You see, so I like that. You start asking the question straight away. What do my questions assume? The primacy of whom? So put your hand up. Yes, sir. The individual. So now, as I'm speaking, I say, so why does your religion not allow, for example, homosexuality? What would you say? In a public square, two men holding hands and kissing in the streets, what's wrong with that?
How would you say this?
No, so what you said before, yes? You said you're presupposing what? You're speaking to me now. Imagine I'm the guy, yeah? So I'm presupposing what? Fine, he is presupposing, and what else?
That the individual right to
Yes, you're presupposing that the individual's right to expression should be prioritized. How do you prove this? I'm stuck now, I'll tell you. I'm stuck now, I'll tell you that. You see, when you start turning the tables over, like in fighting, someone punching you, you start dodging. Only so much you can dodge and parry and stuff. It's gonna land on you. Okay, dodge and parry, and then hit back. And then he's gonna, and then you see his feet shaking. That's what you want, and then kick him. And then maybe take him down. And then take the gun out. And I don't know in South Africa, that's not the first statement. After I was speaking in one of the schools, and one of the kids came to me, young child. He says, is it permissible to kill LGBTs? I said, I know the government told you to ask that question. So I started patting his chest down to see where the mic is. Where's the microphone, man? I said, no, it's not permissible. Anyway, that's not how we're going to do things here. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is another thing. Now, we've got another layer of discussion that people have, yes? And this is another kind of question to ask. Why would somebody, this word here, by the way, yeah, this doesn't mean what this doesn't mean what it means in South Africa. This means disbeliever of Islam. Why would Allah punish a disbeliever in the hellfire or anywhere else? Okay? And then let's be honest about it, yeah? Liberals are actually very clever and very good at appealing to your emotions. They're very, in the West, you'll see how amazing they are. Fantastic. I mean, let me tell you the situation. So imagine you've got a young person, yes? Going to school in, alhamdulillah, you guys have got Islamic schools, so well and good, but in England, you don't have the same ability. And maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, you guys are going to be in a similar position. Maybe, I don't know. You say no? Maybe. I don't know. But the LGBT lobby, for example, and individuals like them, they're very tolerant and very welcoming. So they use the tolerance card, they use the likability card, they use the approachability card. Forget about arguments, let's talk practically. The child comes to the person and says, you know, we accept other people. You can come to us at any time. We accept who we are. And then the boy or the girl, she's in transfer, and then you go back to the parents. Staunch, subcontinental mannerisms. And this is an 11-year-old, you see? He's comparing between this and that. And so they will use mannerisms, empathy, sympathy, emotional kind of behavior to lure the child, groom the child. You have to be careful of this. And then the following shubuhat come about, which is, why would Allah destroy a disbeliever just for having a different view? Just for having a different view, put them in the hellfire for eternity. You see what I mean? Because they made it as if these views are all, it's a minor issue. You have this guy's a Christian, this guy's a Jew, this guy's a Muslim, this minor issue. It's, you know, they all made similar decision making. Why should we be punished like this? This is the kind of beliefs that they have. So obviously it's not how it is in Islam anyway. I mean, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا, for example. We were not going to punish them except if we send them a messenger. This is an ayah of the Quran. So in other words, if someone has a distorted image of Islam and dies, they will go to hellfire. But it's not just that. It's just the fact that we trivialize the idea of tawheed. The discourse of liberalism, it trivializes religious decision-making. Being a Christian or being a Jew or being a Hindu doesn't matter, whatever, it's all the same. So you have freedom of religion, you can do whatever you want. So it trivializes the idea that I'm making a decision which has to do with my afterlife. Be aware of that. And you have to unpack that and challenge that. Because the question is that what counts as important decision making and what counts as not important. It all goes back to prioritization. What they prioritize, what they don't prioritize. So be aware of that. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, and so not everything is because of liberalism and feminism. I mean, nowadays we are living in a time and age where everything is going to be blamed on that. You have an argument with your wife, for example. would be more guilty of this than anyone else. The food, the breakfast should be a certain time, whatever is not there. It's a feminist ideology. We have an argument, this and that. It's like, you're feminist. You know what I mean? It's not the scapegoat. It could be other reasons. It could be because of other factors. It could be psychological factors. It could be your problem. It could be you. It could be anyone. Do you know what I mean? If you consider the following, a lot of that, if you consider the Sahabi and the Sahabiyat, the Sahaba and the Sahabiyat, the companion, male and female, and even the Prophet's interaction with his wife, for example, you'll find that there was lots of issues going on. You cannot say that this is because of feminism, because feminism didn't exist. You see what I mean? In fact, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail, but maybe just one example. And this is a very heavy, important example. One of the, for me, telling hadith on gender relations in all of Islam. And it's hadith of Umar ibn Khattab. He was narrated in Bukhari, and other parts of it is in Tirmidhi and other places. Where basically, Umar ibn Khattab says the following. Umar ibn Khattab says, كنا نحن معشر قريش نغلب نساءنا. We used to dominate our wives, the people of Quraysh. When we went to فلما قدمنا المدينة وجدناهم قوما يغلبهم نساءهم. We found that there are people that their women dominate them. Okay, this part of the hadith problematic for many people. The domination of a woman is expressing any kind of behavior like that. She must be a feminist. How could she be a feminist when feminism didn't exist? We're talking about Sahabiyat, right? But on the flip side, he's not talking about the kind of domination we see now. His idea of domination, as we will see in the very hadith, is a woman, you'll see, again, responding to her husband, being disrespectful and this kind of. So he went back to his wife, Umar ibn Khattab. He went back to his wife. Before that, Ibn Abbas, he said, well, we have issues with even the wives of the Prophet. Obviously, one of his daughters, Hafsa, is the wife of the Prophet. So he went back and he went to his wife and he said to her, I heard that the wives of the Prophet, yeah, they used to be disrespectful sometimes to the Prophet. And the wife of Umar, she started responding to him a little bit. Now imagine this, yeah. He responded, he said, are you responding to me? Yeah, imagine like me and you were talking, and he just like answers back, are you responding to me? So in his mind, his threshold of disrespect is extremely high. By the way, the hadith that says Umar was there and his wife was shouting at him when he was just standing there, that's da'if mawdu'a. This hadith, la asla, rubbish hadith, taqwallah. It's got no, it's ridiculous. You cannot imagine Umar ibn Khattab, the great Khalifa standing there, his wife is shouting at him. Sorry to say, hadith is fabricated probably, but certainly weak. So he said, it's Bukhari. No, God from this one, huh? Are you answering me back? And then in another riwayah, there's other riwayahs where he got very angry. Yeah. So he brought his clothes together. As soon as he found out, he got so vexed and angry and mad. He put his clothes. And he went down to Hafsa, whose daughter is the daughter of Prophet. He said, I heard that you, Hafsa, كنت تهجري النبي من الليل من النهار إلى الليل. That you used to leave the Prophet Muhammad from the day to the night, meaning you just stand and sit there, not speaking to him, not being a fruitful person. She said yes. The fact that she said yes, he got so angry and flipped. It shows you the hope and the love that he has for Prophet. Most of the women in the community, but certainly in other communities in the West Muslim communities, if the daughter complains to the father will be on her side. I don't know about this, but Umar Khattab wasn't about that life. He was like, what are you talking about? He says, the reason why you're doing that is because she's better looking than you. She ajmal minki. He started attacking her looks. So because she's getting rude now, yeah, Umar Khattab is putting her in her place as a father. He said, look, she's better and she's a habit in the Nabi as well. Actually, she's beloved more than them. So he's trying to choose get a route, he go, yeah, that's the point. The same hadith, the Prophet ﷺ went to another place in Sunnah, he left his wives. For 29 days he left them, yeah. And the Quran says, الَّذِينَ يُؤْلُونَ مِنْ نِسَائِهِمْ تَرَبَّصُوا أَرْبَعَةِ أَشْهُرٍ. You can only do that for 4 months in maximum. And the point is that this is the behavior, some of the negative behavior that you find from some of the wives of the Prophet. So when Allah sent down ayat and some connected with this hadith, in كنتن تريدن الحياة الدنيا وزينتها فتعالي ومتعكن وسرحكن سراحا. In chapter 33 of the Quran, if you want the adornments of this life, come and I will set you free. And this was application. The reason why I'm making this to you, pointing this to you, is because I don't want you to think everything is about feminism. Because if it was all about feminism, then how do you explain that? The reason why these women who are the greatest women of all times were misbehaving with the greatest man of all time was not feminism, was to do with a collective female temperament, was to do with behavior, normal behavior of man and woman across the age and history. So knowing the problem of feminism doesn't mean you're going to use it to say everything is feminism. And you're going to go to a household and say, yes, the reason why you're acting like that is because of feminism, we're anti-father, and I'm going to go to another wife and you find the same nonsense, sorry to say, with that. And you'll realize that the problem is not with feminism or with that, it's with you. And your understanding of feminism, and your understanding of female behavior, and your understanding of what's appropriate and not appropriate. So part of knowing what feminism is first knowing what it is not. It's not when somebody acts up in a manner which is psychologically concurrent with their own temperament. Do you see what I'm saying? Likewise, someone can act in a very desirous manner. Someone can act in a very crazy manner. It doesn't mean he's being affected by liberalism. Back in the days, there were people in the Shara, they used to be homosexuals. So you say, Arab, they would write the poetry about the young boys. I'm not sure if you come across these things. The liberalism didn't exist at that time. These proclivities existed before liberalism. Homosexuality existed before liberalism. Musa alayhi salam, he was homosexual. They weren't saying, yes, we're doing this because of John Stuart Mill and so not everything is dependent on these ideologies. Do you understand what I'm saying? However, the ideologies offer a powerful justification for people who want to act in a certain manner. They offer the most powerful justification. The problem is not doing these actions alone, it's justifying it morally. Why from our perspective? Because Allah says, أَمْ شَرَعَ لَهُم مِنَ الدِّينِ مَا لَمْ يَأْذَنْ بِهِ اللَّهُ. It's about legislation. We believe Allah is the only one in control of what is right and what is wrong. They have a different idea of what is right and what is wrong. Allah did not give them permission to tell us what is right and what is wrong. أَمْ شَرَعَ لَهُم. The Quran says, have they legislated for them مِنَ الدِّينِ, from the religion, مَا لَمْ يَأْذَنْ بِهِ اللَّهُ, that Allah did not legislate for them, or did not permit them to do that. You see? So the domain of what is right and what is wrong only goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He's the all-knowing one, the all-wise one, the all-powerful one. It doesn't go to John Locke or, de Beauvoir or whatever it may be. This is the point. So that's an important preface there. Let's go to the next slide. So obviously, some of the things in terms of shubuhat that feminists would argue, or that would be based on a feminist idea, is they'll say, look, in the Quran says, for example, that the male has twice as much as the female. This is talking about brothers and sisters, because we know it's not like that in all cases. We know there are 11 cases where women get more than men in inheritance. We know that there are 6 cases where they get the same. ولأبواه لكل واحد منهما السدس مما ترك إن لم يكن له ولد. وإن كان له ولد فله السدس مما ترك. Yeah, so they both get 6. yeah, of what they, if there's a boy, if there's no boy, they both get a third. So but the father and the mother get a third. Or the father and the mother get a sixth, meaning they get the same. You know what I mean? So it's possible for a man to always get. But the point is this, is that why are we even discussing this? It's because we assume they've made us think everything should be equal. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So equality is justice, which means if there's inequality, there's injustice going on. That's so the fundamental, as we'll come to, the fundamental idea of feminism is that equality is justice. Yes, that's it, simple as that. And Ngozi, she mentioned she's Nigerian, actually. She wrote a book called Feminist Manifesto, very small book. She said everything should be equal except for breastfeeding. Why? Because it's not yeah, she came up with it. Now maybe she'll change her mind. Everything should be absolutely equal. There should be no such thing as maternity leave, or there should be nothing like. Maybe she should go to Ukraine and tell them everything should be equal. The women are running away. I went to the Czech Republic actually the other day. I don't ask why. I went to Prague. I saw all the waitresses were from Ukraine. Oh, my husband, oh, my father is there, this and that. Okay, so, and they're smiling and happy actually, to be honest. They're having a good time, and their fathers are paralyzed, being killed and shot. So there's no equality there. The point is that these are the assumptions. The assumption is that equality is justice. It's really simple as that. Aristotle said, like things should not be treated like for like. Like things should be treated like for like. Different things should be treated differently. Very simple, isn't it? Yeah. You should treat things that are the same. And you should treat things which are different in a different manner. And this is so badi, it's so fundamental and obvious. It's actually difficult and it's hard. It boggles the mind that I have to explain this. For example, we say we should have equality of opportunity. No, Mandela, yeah, okay, we can but no problem. But equality of opportunity is to what extent? Because if I say to you, look, a disabled person is blind. Now he applies to be a bus driver. Now in South Africa, I think he'll get a job. It's fine. If he bribes the people that are not, what he has to do is just close his eyes and keep the runs. But I can tell you for a fact that most people wouldn't want a blind person to be a bus driver. We wouldn't say equality of opportunity. So why? Because he's blind. So what's that mean? It means that he's not the same as someone who can see. Which means that if he's not going to do his job properly, he can hurt somebody, he can harm somebody. Okay, so, which means, what are you telling me now? What are you telling me now? That inequality should be respected sometimes. Is that what I'm telling you? Yeah. So why don't we take a year 6 kid and put them in year 1? Year 1 kid, no, because the ages are different. So what inequality should be respected here? So you're telling me there's exceptions to the rule. You see what I mean? Okay, so, and some feminists would even agree, yeah, it should be maternity leave. The woman, she has, 9 months of this and that, she's working, she should stay for 9 months, for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, 1 year. Yeah? I don't know what in this happens. Do you have maternity leave? Maybe we do that. Maternity leave is 2 weeks now. Maybe they should enact some change in that one. I'm only kidding. But I'm just saying, you see the point, this is because, and this is respectable, it's understandable. Because she is going through some difficulty. He's not going through. So what are you telling me? Inequality should be respected. Hey, okay, inequality should be respected. A man has a collective anatomical biological difference to a woman. In many ways, there's a sexual difference between a man and a woman. Should that not be respected? No, that shouldn't be. Oh, so it should be respected here and should be respected here. Very interesting. This is a raw deal. This is a raw deal. I'm not interested in that kind of deal. But the assumptions in this session, what I wanted to make sure you understand is that both feminism and liberalism have what we call presuppositions, assumptions. What did we say? That the overall assumption for liberalism was the primacy of who? individual. And what is the primary presupposition of feminism? Put your hands up and tell me this, so I can get it one point. Yes, sir. Equality equals what? Justice. There you have it. There you have it. And we've already been able to show through some easy examples that it's not always the case. But then where do we put the line? Sometimes equality is justice. Like equality under the law. That's why there's such in them and established by equality. He was doing wudu, and he said, do women do wudu? Aisha asked him, do women do wudu like the men? He said, in them and established by equality, men are equal to women in these regards, in front of the law. Yani, when Islam talks about a law, pray 5 times a day and salah and all that, the general rule is that the man has with women. We believe in exceptions, they believe in exceptions, our exceptions are different. It's really as simple as that. Yani, the exception we believe the woman has to wear hijab, whatever. I was having a discussion in a place called Leicester Square in England. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, it's completely service. Famous one. And there's a woman I was trying to give dawah to, she was drunk, I think she was. And I decided to kind of leave it, but before I did, and this might be a bit explicit, I said, look, I mean, you believe everything should be equal in terms of dress. She goes, yeah, why don't you? I said, why in this country, if a woman takes her shirt off, like if she's bare-breasted, it's actually illegal. Whereas if I took my shirt off, as I have one time in front of the embassies, no one can say anything to me. So I said, what do you say about this? She goes, no problem. She starts taking it off. I said, listen. I said, you're not understanding what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that most people have understood that anatomical differences, yes, meaning that there's going to be slightly different rules. If you go to a beach, and I've used this example before, they're easy examples for you guys to remember. A woman can wear, in Western, traditional Western culture, let's call it, she wears a bikini. I'm sure many of you know, hopefully you should know too much about it. She wears a bikini. Okay? I'm from Egypt originally. I'm also African. Yes. One time I went to a place, I was a child at the time, and I saw people on the beach. And I asked the guys, what's this you get to beach? People, like, this is a Muslim country. I said, yes, it's for tourists, you know, let them do what they want to do. You collect the money, the Egyptian pounds. Okay, whatever, no, I'm not going to get involved with this child, okay? Anyway, the point is that you can go that far in the beach. The woman can take the bikini, she can do this, she can do that. But the same woman, she goes into the bank with the bikini, everyone's going to look at her, what the hell are you doing? Imagine she goes to a school where she's teaching the kids, and she comes in with a bikini like this. I tell you, there's no place in the West where that's acceptable. There is no place in the West where that is acceptable. Like this dress code in different places is different. Who wrote those rules down? I don't know. I mean, effectively, it's all public. Yeah, if you go to a university, let's not because the school is kids. Let's say you go to a university, if a woman wears a bikini in the university, she's a professor, and she's talking with a bikini. Is anyone going to accept this in the West? I've never seen it in the West. I've never ever seen it. I've been to 4 universities in the West, 4 different ones, and I've never seen this in my life. They always have to quite modest actually. Not with them, but not this, not bikini. Like, why is it allowed bikini? Huh? But it's not allowed. It's allowed in the beach, but it's not allowed in there. In fact, they will tell us to leave. They will even put the security on there. They will not allow us. It's not customary. It's looked down on. Who wrote those rules? They say the white man decided. To use Mandela's terms. The white man. This is very simple. Had this kind of things. The white man decides. So why do I have to follow the white man rules? I'm not the young man. I'm not compelled to this. You see the point? The assumption is equality is justice. That can be shown to be a flaw in so many ways. And these are just examples, hopefully it's called sticky examples. You will not forget them all. Yes, I'm sure everyone, especially from this side of the room, will remember those examples vividly. Next time you guys are having that conversation with someone again, you know, if a woman was in the beginning, maybe one of them was a bikini woman, and they're not even making the argument, they just say this. Well, the point I'm making is, it's easy, you have to start with the assumptions of these ideologies. See, have we got time for the next slide? Probably not. Let's go one more. See? Yes, I told you this already. This hadith is not everything is to do. This is the hadith. If you doubt my narration of it, yes. There you have it. Yeah? But this is just one answer. There's different ways of the hadith in different places. And this, if you want to have the hadith, you guys are not everything to do with feminism, not everything is to do with liberalism. But having said that, after the break, we'll talk about what is to do with feminism and what is to do with liberalism and how we do that. It is 12:30, so I think we're going to do that. Any question? Any good questions before the adhan goes off? Are we taking questions from the sisters? Does sound okay? Yes.
It's a long question.
No, make it short.
Okay, you've discussed the importance of understanding the difference between perceived disrespect for women and simply recognizing inherent female behaviors and characteristics. In light of this, how does the Red Pill ideology contribute to the education of Muslim men about understanding female nature? How can platforms like your friend Ali Dawa's podcast that facilitates interactions between Muslim men and women enhance this understanding, particularly before marriage? Furthermore, are there other effective ways for men to better equip themselves in selecting a suitable life partner, thereby increasing the chances of cultivating a harmonious and stable family life?
Yeah, okay, so no question. So answer your question right here. Red pill are like red pill people. They don't actually act like academics. Frankly, they have a couple of guys, one called Royal Tomasi, the rational male. Yeah, his book is not peer reviewed. It's not really like that. But it's, you know, he makes some points and he does have some study mentioned. But if you look at his bibliography, it's thin, very thin. He's speaking opinions all the time. Like what he says, like a man should go to intercourse with so many women. Based on what exactly? Like, let's take this for example. Let's take this idea that a man should have, to be a real man, you have to have intercourse with, he said 50 women at least. No, he said it as well. I think he took it from him. He said, his numbers, some 30, it was 30, I can't remember what it was. And he said, this is a real man and it gives you experience with women. These are the subscriptions you give, yes. For example. Then why would that make you know women more? Because you only know them in one context, which is a sexual context. Okay, you might know women sexually more, but you're not going to know women more by doing this. Is it time for that? Anyway, I'll answer your question in more depth after the break. Just remember. Let's pray now.